We are live.
Yeah.
So, welcome, Patricia. Thank you.
Hello.
First of all, thank you for coming on and just sharing your expertise. I mean, I know that you have years and years of experience in this topic, in the topic of relationship building, networking, and amongst all of the things that I want to introduce you. But I just want to also thank you because I think this is not our first time going live, and I
Right.
know that people have gotten a lot of value from what you have to share, and I don't. Um, it's just a lot of wisdom that you bring to the table that I just appreciate you agreeing to be here and share that
Yes.
wisdom with the audience, with our audiences, right? So
Yes.
for those of you who haven't had the pleasure of meeting Patricia yet, first of all, go run and meet Patricia. And you can find her on LinkedIn. But Patricia V. Hayes, JD, is a licensed attorney who serves as an executive strategic advisor, career empowerment coach, and authentic networking strategist. She is the owner of PVH Consulting Group, LLC, a strategy consulting and leadership development firm where she helps professionals develop empowered networks that are purposefully aligned, which is beautiful, with their careers and their business goals. Patricia's professional relationship building expertise stems from her 30-year career in the legislative and policy arena, serving as a respected candidate and advisor to executive leaders at all levels. She's a recognized community leader and dedicated advocate for educational equity, women's economic empowerment, and child abuse prevention. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
You
I love like being with you, talking with you all the time. So like this is a
Yes.
no-brainer.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Well, today's topic is all about collaborations, but diving in and to the relationship piece of what it takes to even find out what a good where collaboration magic can happen in a
Mhm.
relationship when you're meeting people. And I'll talk a little bit about I come from to collaborations from a systematic like thought process, right? Like,
Right,
okay,
right.
here's the back end of when you're building relationships, like where you can put the contacts and what happens next and the reminders to follow up with people. And that's the lens that I bring to the table. But the lens that you bring to the table is really around the expertise around relationship building and
Right.
the networking and the strategies that go behind that. And one of the things I do want to point out before I get into the questions is that one of the ahas we had on our last live, which was probably about a year ago, is
Mhm.
that I was struggling with when you first get into networking or whatnot, and especially if you're like this heart-centered, big-hearted leader, right? And you're like, I don't want to be slimy with people. I don't want to have
Right.
an agenda and all these things. And I kind of felt that way. And I also knew that everybody in that was networking has an agenda and is being strategic in that way. And you gave me permission. You said you can be authentic and strategic. I will
Yes.
never forget that. I'll
Oh,
never forget
good.
that lesson because it really let me not feel slimy about it, even though I knew that other people were building relationships with me. And it's not even just for the benefits, just to see is there synergy? Is there an opportunity to do business together? Is there an opportunity to refer? And when I was doing it, it felt like, ooh,
Right.
but you gave me that permission to be like, no, you can be authentic. You are being authentic and you can be strategic. That never ever left me. And it really just helped in my letting my guard down and not feeling so icky about building relationships with people. So yeah, so I just wanted to talk to that as well. And then I'll dive into the questions. I know I feel like I'm talking a lot to get it. Your turn to answer some questions.
I was like, you're up here tossing. I'm like, okay, wait, I said that. Let me make sure and write that down because we get to go in and we forget. But that's one of those things that people do feel like that. And a lot of you stated something that's real important is because so many people, I mean, we know this, and it's still true when it comes to professional skills. The two most hated things are public speaking and networking. Like it is a constant. If you go to any career development type of thing, it is still at the top of the list of the things that people hate the most. Yeah. And it's hilarious to me because those are two of my favorite things to do, right? Yep. Yeah. And I say that very guardedly because I am not one of those, oh, let me go to run around to all those events. Like I will tell people there are certain things I really hate to do. I hate happy hours, right? And that's one of the common places for people to quote network. But it's really about how you approach what it is you're doing and doing it, like you said, authentically. And it is okay to be strategic and have goals around your relationship building rather than the thing that makes people feel icky is that transactional agenda piece, right? So it's really about, is your agenda relationship based and relationship forward versus the transactional of, let me go in, let me see if I can get something out of this. If not, let me go on to the next thing. That's why people feel icky, right? Is because they know when someone's approaching them from that perspective. And so, you have permission to not be that person and to not engage with those people and to move along. And once you do that and you start your relationship building where you are comfortable and then push yourself and challenge yourself to do something that's a little less in your comfort zone, that's where you get the growth. That's where you get the opportunities that you really don't expect to start showing up.
Ooh, I love that. I love start where you're comfortable. Yeah. And like even the difference. So even just before now, I thought like networking is networking, but you just pointed out like you personally don't like the happy hour. There may be somebody who does like the happy hour that maybe wants to start with in that in where they're comfortable, right? Maybe they're comfortable in happy hour. And I think that leads us to even like where we're talking about finding opportunities. If you're already starting from an uncomfortable place, right? You likely aren't going to be looking or open or in a space even, I'm thinking of like, is there opportunities? Is somebody saying something that could be an opportunity because you're so like maybe what do you call it? Like
very self-conscious.
Yes. And worried about, oh, I don't really like this like happy hour thing, or, maybe somebody doesn't drink, right? And it's something at the bar. So I think that was really important to highlight what you said is like, start with where you're comfortable, whatever that looks like, and then start pushing yourself kind of outside the box. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And one of my favorite things that I like to tell, because as you know, like I said, my background in doing this was really starting from all the, years of doing legislative work, which is literally built on relationships, right? You have to have relationships with your colleagues in order to pass legislation. You have to have relationships with policymakers and, and legislators in order to get your stuff, you're selling the idea of, hey, this piece of legislation. And if you don't have a good relationship, or if someone just decided you're off, like that is, you don't even get to the first base because there's no relationship and they're not willing to engage with you that way. Right. And so, it's really interesting and translating what that does. But one of the things that I always use as the example is as a young lobbyist, I was the baby lawyer, the baby lobbyist. And so guess what I got to do? I got to go to those horrid fundraiser receptions where you had to hand off the check to the lawmaker, to the legislator, right? During campaign season. I detested that. But that was like literally a part of my job. So that's why I want to offer that, because people are like, well, what if it's something that I have to do? And so that was a piece that I did not enjoy doing. It that truly felt slimy. I'm just coming up and shaking hands and handing off a check. But what I learned to do in order to make it comfortable for me and to grow in that was I always went with another set of goals. Handing off the check was my employer's goal. Right? They needed that to happen. What did I need to happen? So I would say, hey, I wonder if so-and-so is going to be there. Maybe I can talk to them about that piece of legislation we're thinking about doing. I wonder if so-and-so, person B is back from their trip. I'm interested in going where they went. So let me, check and look at them. And then a third thing. So I always went with 2 or 3 other goals and purposes, and that made it much more manageable for me. And whereas I would have normally I always would go into those types of environments with the intent of I'm going in for 15 minutes and I'm out, and then I find myself closing the place down, right? Because I get comfortable, I start talking to more people, and then I look up, I'm like, oh my God, I did not intend to be here this long. So that's how it evolves, right? And even to this day, it still happens. There are moments where there's some place I need to go. I really don't feel like it. I go, I'm like, okay, let me go see X. Like, this is the person I really want to connect with, and I think they're going to be there. And I go, and then I end up closing the place down. So,
That's awesome. That's awesome. So when you're in those conversations, I want to stick on this topic a little bit. And, I think maybe what we can translate this to is, I don't always promote if you don't want to, collaborations for entrepreneurs is a strategy to get more visible, right? And to have, to grow your audience, right? And so whatever it might be, it also could be, maybe you're getting paid to collaborate with somebody or do it like a joint venture. So that can be another goal. But when you were talking about you're in the conversations and you're meeting people, when you're in those conversations and you have this common connection, or how are people finding the common connection? Let's say that they, I'll speak for myself. Like, I am starting to in-person network, and I'm like, okay, it is a little uncomfortable, but also how would somebody like me go about finding that connection? What are some tactics in conversation? What am I listening for something? Am I, to possibly see, maybe my goal is and this is true. My goal is I would love to book some, even if it's free, speaking events in my community, because this is a new market for me. So I would love to just, at the business center or something like that. So that's my goal kind of going into these networking groups. So from that perspective, what advice would you give somebody that has a goal of something, and then they're meeting people? What are some tactics, or what do you do?
Yeah.
Speak to the person that's uncomfortable, right? It's not really not a social butterfly, or doesn't hold the conversation very easily.
Yeah. So, and which touches a little bit on my, the whole introvert saying, oh, I'm not good at networking because I'm an introvert. I'm like, that is not a thing.
Okay.
You can be reserved, but introverts talk to people too. That's what I always tell people. I'm like, you just do it differently and in different audiences. So I never allow being an introvert to be an excuse. Most people say that because they're thinking about walking into a conference or a gala of 300 people and being like, that is not my scene. Well, guess what? It doesn't have to be your scene. If you know how to schedule coffee or lunch or attend a small event, you can achieve, attend a lunch and learn, you can achieve similar goals just using different strategies to get there, right? Thinking about those places and building up that, it's a muscle. It is literally a skill. People think it's just, something you do. Networking is a skill. It is something you have to put effort into in order for it to actually be effective. And so that's literally, before you go out and do anything, is you have to think about, what is it it's from two perspectives. Most of the time, people focus on the professional or the business perspective. I need to go to this because I need more speaking events. I need to know more people so that I can have a collaboration to do X. And most of the time, we forget about the personal development side of it. What do you, and that's why they're uncomfortable, right? They're not seeing it as a personal development opportunity as well. And so, and I tell people all the time, we are not flat Stanleys. We are multidimensional, and you have to enter these situations as a multidimensional person, which relieves some of that stress. Because if you go into it saying, trying to pretend like you're not uncomfortable, that is going to be a hot mess waiting to happen. Right. So you have to acknowledge your personal growth that's going on at the same time as these professional goals, which will be, okay, I need to do this for business. Personally, this is not my most favorite thing to do. So what am I going to do to help myself grow personally? Like, what are going to be my top 3 things I'm going to focus on? So maybe it's going to be, you know what, I'm going to go. I'm not really comfortable in large crowds, but I'm going to make a point of talking to 3 people I do not know when I go today. Right? Okay. That's not just to say, oh, so that you can figure out you have a collab. This is for you to learn the skill of approaching people cold.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And so that is a skill. So you have to, that's really the first thing that people have to do that they don't do. Is you have to do an assessment of yourself and where you are and what it is you want to do next, right? Professionally and personally, so that you can get to that next level. And then by the time you're ready to move into and say, okay, you're going to go to this, let's say it's a lunch and learn or a happy hour, and you go in and you're like, okay, what is it that I really wanted to accomplish here? So you've got your personal goals, which is I'm going to make myself talk to 3 people I don't know, because a lot of times we will go to stuff like that. And then you hone in on the person you know, and then you stick to them like glue, right? That is defeating the purpose of what you're trying to do. I know. I feel you. So you have to break yourself of that habit. So you have to be aware of that being your tendency and to actively put yourself in a situation not to do that, right? That's that pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, right? So maybe your goal is, I will go and I'm going to speak to 2 people before I go talk to the person I do know. And then knowing that you still have a 3rd one, because you're like, you said you're going to speak to 3, and make sure you break off. You say, hey, I got to go meet some new people. We'll check back up later and do that. So you arrange it however you need to, right? Yep. At the same time, your professional goal is, I'm keeping my eyes and ears open for potential opportunities, for learning more about people so that I can do that. And this is that piece where I say, do not go into these events thinking you have to go meet up with 50 people, right? If you're doing that, you're not, especially if you're more reserved or introverted, like that's going to seem very overwhelming. And just out of reach, right? I've been doing this for decades. And even that, sometimes I'm like, yeah, I can't feel that today, right? So just be much more realistic about it. And the other reason is because you can't get to know 50 people in 2 hours.
Right. Yeah.
You want to be able to have conversations at enough depth to where you can make a quick assessment of, hey, this is somebody I want to follow up with, which means you have to slow your roll, introduce yourself, let other people introduce you, have a bit of conversation. And guess what? If you end up talking to one person for 10 or 15 minutes, that's okay, because it means there's something you're sharing, there's might be something you're clicking, and you're not going to get all the way to the depth of it, but just standing there, if you're having conversation with someone you did not know before, maybe a mutual friend has introduced you at this event, and you're doing it for 10 or 15 minutes, that allows you to get to know and put your listening ears on, not the hearing ones. You know how your mom always say, I'm talking to you, but you are not. It's like you hear me, but you're not listening, right?
Yes.
Because that's a different thing. Hearing will mean you're there, the sound is coming through, but you're scoping out who your next thing. That's again another one of those transactional pieces why people don't like the to network. But when you're listening, that means you're actually paying attention to what someone is saying without trying to plan what it is you're going to say next.
That's so good.
And so
it's like
little thing.
Yeah.
And so that's that thing. And so this is why if you go to an event, your goal, depending on the size and what it's about, your goal to interact, it might be only 5 people. Because you might only be able to spend, enough time really chatting with 5 people.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
I would much rather go home with 5 people. I could actually say, hey, they have a kid, they have this business, like, what kind of book they read.
Yeah.
I would much rather go home with that type of information than, oh, well, I think they said they work at this law firm and I have this card and then that's it. Like, that's all you got.
Yes.
Because you're just there to collect cards.
Yes. Oh my God.
My strategy. This is advanced.
Okay.
I don't even carry cards anymore.
Okay. Because you go a little bit deeper versus, like you said, you slow your roll versus trying to talk to so many people or making I need to talk to 10 people. Yeah.
Yes. Even when I carry cards, if someone asked me for it, I probably would give it to them.
Yeah.
There are a few times I might be like, oh, I'm out. I might tell a little white lie, because if I can tell if it's a transactional thing, I'm like, I don't want you nagging me because we're not really vibing.
Yeah.
Right. But if I initiated handing a card, that's somebody I really wanted to be able to follow up with. But let's say I've moved beyond it. I don't even carry cards. I tell you to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yep.
Or connect with me, however, send me an email or whatever. People know how to find it. We live in the day of Google.
Yeah.
That is a Google search.
Yeah. I don't want to take a hard left on that, but if we have time, I want to circle back to that piece about like actually making the connection. Because I think that's also a hard piece of like, do we share LinkedIn? Do we give them a form? Do we give them our card? Like, what's the one appropriate thing? And I say this because, it's like so interesting. I want to go there, but I know I want to go somewhere else too. But it's because I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday who said that I was telling her about like the digital form that I have. And I told her how I went to a networking group and I didn't use it because it felt very transactional to hand somebody a form. And I go, tell me your thoughts about that. And she was like, actually, somebody did that to me. And I gave them the wrong email address because it did feel, she goes, even though I know that when we exchange cards, it's the same thing. You're giving them your information, but somehow like handing somebody a form feels very like transactional and weird still, even though it's the same thing. Anyway, I wanted to get into that, but I just want to point out there was so many like golden nuggets. So I want to like try to call out what I remember. I have like the worst short-term memory. But
sorry. I mean, I just kept rolling and it's all just for context. All of that is in the base of what you're saying. Like, how do you even get to being able to do it? And those are the things you have to do to get to where you could even be in the space to identify a potential collaborator partner. There's work that has to be done with yourself before you can even do that.
Oh my good. That's what I'm saying. That was gold. Like the fact that you were saying like, okay, cool, have professional goals. But if you're already coming from a place of like, personally, you're just not there yet. It was almost like I was saying, Patricia, teach me how to run when I didn't even ask you how I should be walking first. Like I need to like walk, and you're like, slow your roll, like walk first, right? Like get comfortable in the space so that you can then have some professional goals that will be easier to meet, right? Or be easier to like listen or whatnot. If you're personally there, right? If your growth is there. So I thought that was so like powerful because I am guilty of like skipping that step really, and just almost like, I didn't realize it until this conversation, but like almost like faking it till I make it, right? Which is not my style, but like I guess I just didn't know how to deal with my personal feelings like in that situation, because I'm like pivoting to in person. Like this is my story, right? And this may not be everybody's story, but because I'm pivoting to in person, I still feel like I'm coming from, I'm comfortable networking like virtually, right? But like it still, like I'm a baby in the in person, I'm still a baby in the in person networking. So yeah, I thought that was so interesting to say. And I know there was one other thing that I knew I was going to forget, but we'll have it here. So play it back a couple times, because you said a few things that were super super key. So thank you for sharing that. Even before you can identify collabs, there's some personal growth that needs to happen, and some personal goals is what you should be setting alongside your professional goals. And that's what I picked up from that. Okay. So in terms of the building and maintaining of strategic relationships, when it comes to, let's say we talked about, also slowing your roll. That was it too. Slowing your roll of like, don't go out like spraying and praying and saying, I have this goal of like meeting 20 people, or, even 10 people. Sometimes that's too much, right? Of like, let me meet them and let me get like this much of information. It's better to go deep and like to really understand 2 or 3 people. And so how does someone take the relationship to the next level? So I call this like cultivate a second conversation. Like how would somebody go about that? And then like talk to the building and maintaining of strategic relationships and what you have done or seen successful around that.
Yeah. So a couple of little strategies and tactics, whether you carry cards or not, right? When you're listening for 2 or 3 things to remember about this person that you literally go home and like write them on the back of the card, or you write them in however you're keeping your contacts, right? So if we're talking for the first time and I hear that you say something about you traveled out of the country recently, I'm like, okay, Bing. And that you really like to read, or you really love cooking. And so I'm literally taking note of those 2 or 3 things.
Okay.
Whether they're personal or professional, right?
Okay.
And I'm taking note of that. And then when I follow up with you and say via email or via DM, hey, Alicia, it was so good meeting you at X, because you have to do that. And I hope that I can't wait to see this, the pictures you share about your trip to Y. Would love to have a conversation where we could get together for coffee or lunch soon. Let me know what your calendar looks like. Do you see what I just did?
You connected to what you listened for to a personal email. Yeah.
Yes.
Love it.
It can be that simple, which is why. So when I go and why I always say, emphasizing just for me, like LinkedIn or some other social media thing where you can see it, is you can also go learn a lot about people on that site, like, and LinkedIn, because it's the professional one that most people use, right?
Most people are, that are networking. Yeah.
And so you can learn a lot. If it's slim pickings on it, it means they don't really use that a lot. So I already know I am not going to be following up regularly with that person on LinkedIn, more than likely.
Yep. Yeah.
Versus someone who has a very robust page, they're posting all the time, or whatever. Well, now not only do I know more about you just from like physically what you do, I also know what you're interested in, because if you're posting things or if you're liking things, I can go learn and read from stuff like that, which will mean, hey, I saw you posted that article about the current economic state, and I'm really interested to learn more on what you thought about that.
Yeah. So, and this also brings up like the thought of not speaking to like 20 people or 10 people that you then have to come back and like the time, right, that it takes to like look up somebody, send them an email and things like that. Like it takes a little bit of time. So if you have like 5 people versus 20 people that you think, to follow up with, it kind of brings it back to that as well, right?
It does. It does. And that's not to say you blow off those other people. Conferences are a great example of that, right? Where it's literally you get dumped in the middle of all these folks. The same strategy works. You focus in on, let's say if it's a 3-day conference, okay, fine. So you're going to focus in on, maybe the goal is meeting 5 new people per day. So that gets you to 15, but you may have been exposed to 100, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's a completely different conversation. But what I will say is that's when you make sure you have the conference directory and that most conferences keep of attendees, and you make sure you keep that, and you go through and mark anyone who you came across so that you can then put them on a longer timeline to follow up with them, because you could always say, hey, I missed talking to you directly at X conference, would love to follow up.
That's so good. Yeah.
That's a whole other one. But it's never that, oh, I can't do this because, like, no. I keep those type of resources are invaluable. Most people do not use them to if at all.
I didn't meet this person. So you never think to go back to the directory and use that as a resource and leverage.
Yep.
That's a connection point. That's what I'm picking up on, right? Like that's your entry point to
because you already have the same interest. You were at the same conference.
Yeah.
And that's not fake. If you were at the same conference, then it's like, okay, you might have been there for different reasons, but you were at the same conference. So that is a jump off point for conversation.
Right?
I
love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, okay. So one of the things I wanted to also ask was, this is a good one. What would you say to someone? So let me set this up. So in collab, when we're talking about collabing with others, especially like if someone is trying to collab like with someone that it's a few levels up, right? Maybe they're a key person in like I live in San Antonio, maybe they're a key person in San Antonio, but they know that this person could benefit them in some way, whether it's the audience size or whether it's an opportunity that we talked about raising the status. I announced, who are we talking to? And I said, me collabing with Patricia raises my status, right? So, it's raising, it's true though. Like that's the thing, right? When you connect with somebody, sometimes your status gets raised in the market, right?
Yeah.
And so so thinking about someone who's maybe, a couple levels down from someone else, or maybe we can say seemingly, right, levels down from someone else. And this person is rejecting collaborations or holding themselves back from even making an ask of like, oh, I would love to partner with someone. Can you talk to a little bit about like how to close that gap, whether it's directly for this person or tactics that they can do to help close the gap between someone that's a little bit higher level than them or more experienced?
So that's one of those things I talk a lot about too. And it's one of those I have to practice on myself because that's always a personal stretch goal.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you want to be at step 5 and you're step 3, guess what you have to stop doing? You have to stop hanging with step 3 people trying to get to step 5 people. It means at some point you have to stretch to a step 4 or a step 5 person if that's where your goal is. And that's what holds us back, right? So that's a complete mindset thing. That's again, those personal goals and mindset. And so, and recognizing that is the first acknowledgement, right? And that's a lifelong journey thing. That's not I got it this point, because as soon as you set a new goal, guess what? That means there's a whole other set of people that you need to reach for, right? Now, does that say, am I saying ignore the people at step 3? Absolutely not. Because most of the time, your access to the step 5 person is probably through a step 3 person, right? But I'm saying you have to be actively engaged, listening and talking and being vulnerable enough to the right person to say, hey, I am really trying to achieve this, and I know I'm not quite at that level with some of those people yet. What do you suggest? Have you experienced that, or do you know someone? You'd always be surprised that the person will come like, oh, well, yeah, that's my cousin so-and-so. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, I have literally had moments like that where you're hedging, and then they're like, yeah, that's my brother's, girlfriend. Or, I mean, you're just like, what? And every time that moment happens, I just like knock myself in the head because it still happens. So it does not matter how much experience, how long you've been around, there will always be those moments. But when you leave yourself open to it, opportunities that you had never even thought of will come your way, right? I've had that. I think I may have told you, one of my dream boards that I wanted to be on for years was the Texas Book Festival. And so I'd always dreamed about that. I'm like, I'm never going to get to that. That's crazy. But I keep it on the list. Years. Like, I've gone to all of them since they started. I mean, just different things. I've been an ambassador, so I do the things. I put myself out there. I volunteered over years. Last summer, I get an email from someone asking me to serve on their board of advisors. So they have 2 boards. And I got asked to be on their board of advisors in this late night email. I about dropped my computer. What? You want to know how? Someone who is a little older than me, but who is very active in the community, we met in the lobby space. Had become chair of the main board and was like, yeah, you're one of my first asks, because I knew immediately I need you. I have never shared with her that I wanted to be on that board. Never. We've talked over the years. I check in. Hi, Miss So-so, I've never shared that was a goal or a dream of mine. But when you keep putting yourself in those spaces, those opportunities come up. Right? And some things, that's why I say this is the long term. Sometimes this is a long game, right? Are there short-term strategies? Sure. But it doesn't mean you switch to transactional just because it's short term. You speed up your relationship building efforts and probably are much more targeted. And that happens, but you don't do that all the time because you'll burn yourself out. Right? So you're always planting those seeds for the long term, because you never know when something's going to pay off. And someone says, hey, I know someone who's trying to work on this deal, and they need someone like you to come in and help pull it off. Right? Those things happen all the time. Right? And so that's, again, like I said, that mindset piece of being willing to lay the groundwork, be vulnerable, and then literally sometimes just put yourself in a position that's completely going to be uncomfortable, which may mean, attending the first meeting of a group where a lot of these people are going to be, but you've never been before. You don't know anybody.
Okay. So get yourself in the room is what I'm picking up.
In the room.
And plant the seed.
And plant the seed.
And when is it appropriate, or how do you know when it's appropriate to just go for it? So let's just say that I wanted to connect with the mayor and I had some goal that I know I needed the mayor, or something like that. Like, when is it appropriate to go for it? Or do you feel like my brain is kind of spinning, because I'm like, oh my gosh, there's just so much, but when is it appropriate to make that ask, or do you, how do you know, right? Or you planted a seed, maybe you've attended a few events and you've, met this person in some way, shape, or form, but there hasn't really been an opportunity that's presented itself, but you're like, man, if I just got this person on board for my vision, or for, I want to be on their podcast or whatever it is, how do you, when is it okay to do it?
Well, I mean, and that's that thing. I think that's an interesting word. You said appropriate, right?
Yeah.
And because, again, you're putting parameters around it, as if there's also, quote, an inappropriate time to go after a goal.
Okay.
Right? So, and I get what you mean, but I'm just pushing back a little
No,
bit
please.
because
Yeah,
there's a limiting undertone
a
to it, right?
limiting. Okay.
So now the thing may be, is the timing right? That's a legit question, right?
Okay.
What's the timing like, right? Do you run up on somebody when they've got 25 people around them and they can't pay attention? No, the timing is not right for that.
Okay. Understood.
If you see their chief of staff standing off to the side on the phone with nobody around them, guess what? The timing is right for that, though, to go say, hey, I just want to touch bases. I would love to follow up with you later to talk about this thing to see if the mayor might be interested in. Do you see, so many times we're focused on the thing that you've got those blinders on and you're not seeing the opportunities around the thing that will get you there, just not as directly, because we think, if I don't go directly at it, then it's not going to happen.
Patricia, I don't even know what to say. Oh my gosh. That is just so important to point out, because you're like, I need to talk to that person right there. And you're like, let me talk to that person. Let me pitch. Let me whatever, right? And it's not like, what if their best friend, right, is like over here and like,
I'm going to tell you a classic thing I used to do when I lobbied.
Okay.
So when I go to committee hearings or whatever, everybody's running to try and find a chair and get that seat at the front or whatever. Now, I hate standing, and so I will try to get a seat if I'm going to be there a really, really long time. But a lot of times I wouldn't sit. I'd stand at the back of the room. I'd stand at the back of the room on purpose, because people are thinking, oh, you got to pay attention to what the committee members are saying, the legislators are saying. I'm like, no. I'm paying attention to who's talking to who's stepping outside the door to go have a chit chat off to the side, and who's chatting. I'm like, well, I didn't even know that they communicated. That's interesting. I'm watching all the other stuff that's going on in the room and outside the room. That is providing a lot more insight, because most of the time those meetings are recorded. So unless I'm up specifically, I can go back and listen and catch what I need. But that stuff that's going on in the room, that's not recorded. You can't catch that later.
Yes.
Right? That's the peripheral things that are going on, as opposed to like, oh, I just have to go do this. Right? Meanwhile, I'm watching who's talking to who, whatever. And then I'm like, time for me to slip out the door myself. Let me go slip out the door and go sit in this hallway and see what's going on.
Patricia, we just went through a crazy tech issue that took us 15 minutes to resolve. We're back.
So wild.
I know. I'm like, that has never happened in StreamYard. I'm so sad. I had to be on my end.
No, it's always great. So
yeah, it had to be on my end, because it was my computer that was all janky and frozen and everything. And so, I don't know what just happened. But what I will say is that I want to ask you, first of all, thank you for sharing so many things. I honestly think that this could be many masterclasses. It could be 3 to 10 hours of us really getting deep into talking about relationship building strategies and networking. I know you were on a roll. I hate to cut us off, but I know we're on almost hitting an hour of time, right? That I just want to say thank you and give you an opportunity to share with people what you have going on, and if there's somebody that does need help in this arena, how do you support people? Where can they find you? All of the great things.
Yeah. So because I have only mentioned LinkedIn 50,000 times in this conversation, so that should be the hint of where to start. I am on all the, platforms, because like I said, some people will respond in one space that they won't respond in another. And so I go to where people are and try to engage that way. So you can find me on Instagram as well. And I do still have a Facebook business page, which went out of fashion and came back into fashion. I never dropped mine, so I've been good all along. So you can find me in all the places. My website is patriciavhayes.com. and it has links to all of the things. It's very static, but Keeping Up With Me Live will be on the LinkedIn. I do coffee chats every Monday and Wednesday. They are pre-recorded now, but they're still fresh on Mondays. And then Wednesdays you get a little something from the vault. But those come out scheduled 10 o'clock on Mondays and Wednesdays, 10 o'clock Central Time still. And again, if you go to anything, you can, go look at all the old stuff on YouTube. So that's a freebie resource you can have access to. In February, my masterclass for February is going to be revisiting my Diversifying Your Professional Relationships class. And it's one that's been around for a while that I've literally had to, bring down, and then there's a course and some follow-up work that you can get into. And it really dives into the whole thing about how do you build out your professional relationship so that it looks like a really good chef salad and not a head of lettuce. That's the analogy I like to use.
And then what you're saying is that, excuse me, there's key people that you need.
Yes. You do not want your network to be homogenous in any kind of way. Real quick, diversity is a loaded word these days, but that's for small-minded people because diversity includes so many things.
Yep.
Geography, backgrounds, levels professionally. There's so many things. And so I really go deep into talking about, or, showing you about like what all the opportunities are that you may be ignoring because you got a head of lettuce and not a, salad bar. And, and then also some things to do to help kind of, again, like we talked about, pushing the envelope, challenging yourself to go beyond your comfort zone, because when you have a diverse professional relationship, again, you open yourself up to a whole other world. So that's the masterclass that's on the books for February. The masterclass itself will be free. You can get registered for it. It'll be after February 1st, and I think that'll get posted. And then you'll and then there's some other opportunities to work with me in small group settings post masterclass. So I'm always excited about that. And then my newest kind of offer is I'm calling it the professional coffee chat, where literally it's that cross between, or it's the happy medium between going full blown into long-term coaching, which I still do one-on-one, but everybody doesn't have the time or the resources to do that right off the bat. And the other very small thing of just doing like a strategy hour where it's not enough for you to really get into some depth. So I've started what I've called this new one, where it's going to allow you to commit on a monthly or quarterly basis to come in. You'll get access to me via Voxer. I'll do Q&As that'll get posted. You can go back and check into them, and literally get to pick my brain privately, knowing you have access to do so from that perspective. And for those who don't know, Voxer is basically a cross between a walkie-talkie and an email. So it's the best of both worlds, right? You get to speak it and or type it.
I love Voxer.
It's in real time. Yeah, it's in real time. So that flexibility.
So is that private, or would that be in a group setting at a certain time?
It's so it's not in a small, when I say small group, as in, let's see, you said private. It's not going to be at a certain time. That's one of the things, because that's that piece that people don't have, right? So it'll be a matter of, when I say small group, is like there'll be a small group of people that will have access at a time or whatever. I don't want it to get too big, but I just have to see it because it's beta, right? This will be beta. Yeah. The difference between the professional and the executive level is the executive level, like, we got to have a chat before you come in, because the executive level people are a whole other, range. and they will have actual live one-on-one access. So there's 2 levels. And executive level will have a 2-hour office hours that will have live actual access. So that's my compromise for folks who want access to me and my brain, but can't commit to long-term coaching and know that a power hour is not enough. So that's the thing.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. And if you didn't see it or are not paying attention, Patricia's LinkedIn is at the bottom. You can connect with her there. And I will also add, because she didn't say, but I know that she's a powerful keynote speaker. So if you are looking for a speaker for your organization, whether it's in small groups or literally hitting the stage, Patricia has years of speaking and actually, I have been witness to someone booking and the follow-up of what people were saying and getting that feedback for her. So I know that she's great. And but she's also a speaker if you're looking to fill spots in that capacity. So thank you so much, Patricia. And I will say that the conversation around collabs, I will be bringing in experts to talk about this relationship building. And what I'm providing is a collaboration relationship management system in a box. If you've been watching any of my content, and even if you haven't, I'm releasing a series of systems in a box that will help you design your entire customer journey. The collaboration relationship management system in a box is really going to take you through how to track and how to maintain and build those relationships from start to end from a systematic place. And then Patricia's given us some really, really great nuggets to chew on to figure out, okay, once I have this system of where am I going to track people? What do I need to pull together before I even, do a collab with somebody or make a request? I go through putting your collab collateral together and those types of very tactical, systematic things. And then Patricia, you've talked to us about the relationship building strategies of okay, cool, I have the system, but when I actually go and interact with the person, what are my goals around that? And how am I moving this relationship from this point to this point, and making ask for a collab. So if you're interested in getting information about the collaboration relationship management system, jump on the wait list. I'm going to post both of our links, and you can find the wait list there, and you can find Patricia's information and how to further your conversation with her there as well. So,
and I have to jump in here because Alicia is not going to say it, so I will say, she is like a system guru. She got me straight on a peace of mind. I'm like, okay, I have to come back and finish out the rest of some more stuff, because literally it just totally helps to streamline my thinking and how I interact. It allows me more freedom moving forward when I'm interacting with clients or potential clients, because I have some place to put this stuff. So
you have a place to track it. Yeah,
I have a place to track it. I have a system, a way of thinking about it. And again, it's still always a learning opportunity involved. Always.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. Well, thank you. And thank you for those of you sticking around and tuning in to our conversation. And I know that you got value. I don't even have to second guess that. I know that you saw my light bulbs going off. So I know that if you were interested in this conversation, you definitely got value. So thank you, Patricia, for being here. And
absolutely,
we'll see y'all later.